Hey everyone, today I'm going to be going over a rooted dirt and azalea tree farm I've made in Minecraft version 1.17.1, and there will be a world download in the description if anyone wants to give the farm a closer look for themselves. So rooted dirt was literally just added in 1.17, and I have to say it's probably the best looking block in the entire game, second to only like glazed terracotta or diorite or something. So, it's great to put into your house. Um, but also it can be used for farming reasons. So if you have some bone meal and some shears, you can put some rooted dirt up in the air and you can bone meal it. And if you use shears, you will get some hanging roots. And hanging roots are great because you can compost them. But not only that, you can really spruce up your builds by incorporating them, make them a little more lifelike. But the reason I made this farm was so I could get 41 rooted dirt to put into my house's sorting system so I can sort for rooted dirt. Um, but an optional thing you could also do with this farm is indirectly make normal dirt. So if you take rooted dirt and a shovel and you have a little system like this, what you can do is turn it into dirt path, and then you could just have this piston push it into a bombing chamber or something. And then when all of that gets blown up, you will have dirt, which is just great. You can never have enough dirt, especially if it's rooted dirt, because rooted dirt's better. Rooted dirt being such a good block is one of the reasons I made this farm. But before I get into how the farm works, I want to tell you a bit about its stats. These are all based on a 6-hour trial run I did yesterday. So it's a bit of a hungry lad. It consumes well over 3,700 bone meal per hour, and it produces over 9,800 items per hour, most of which is not dirt, but we'll get to that. This farm was designed to produce rooted dirt specifically, so everything else is just kind of extra items that get made. But the best part about it is there's no player input required once you actually turn it on. So no auto clickers needed, no nothing. You just gotta turn it on and then just, I guess, stand by it or something while it works. But once you flick this lever, this piston will extend, which will allow a pulse to come through to make the farm work in a cycle. But as you can see now, there's not exactly a pulse coming through, and that's because the pulse comes from this flying machine. And if this block is pulled out, then that pulse can't get to the machine, so it won't leave. So when you flip this lever, this observer will notice this light turning on, and then that will send another pulse through and get the machine started. And a bit about the machine. So it and the second machine in this minecart system are all powered by observers that see this note block going off. And so a bit about this flying machine. So when rooted dirt is made, it is when one of these azalea or flowering azalea plants has been grown on top of moss and then bone mealed into a tree. And the second this tree is here, you can't really fit an azalea there because there's a tree in the way, right? So this machine solves that problem and collects the rooted dirt for all of your needs. So this piston here will push the rooted dirt towards the collection system, and these two pistons will push these logs up. It's important that these two get out of the way, because if you just get rid of this one, like an azalea could fit, but it's not going to grow because the moss is not going to be able to spread to it unless both of these are gone. As while we're in here, we'll talk about the mosser too. So this module here will bone meal a moss block 4 times per cycle in quick succession. And when that happens, sometimes an azalea or a moss carpet or some grass or something will grow up here. And when that happens, you can't bone meal it anymore. So this piston will punch it out of the way so more stuff can grow. And 4 pulses is usually enough to turn all the stone into moss, and we'll get to the stone in just a minute. That's the first flying machine. The second flying machine will deal with the tree. So when the logs are pushed up, they'll get right here. And the thing is, if the machine just kept pushing tree cycle after cycle, eventually you'd get to the push limit and then it would jam because you wouldn't be able to push the bottom trunks out of the way. So this machine solves that problem by pushing the logs this way, and then when they get pushed far enough, they will get into blast radius, or get into the blast radius of all of these TNT dupers. And these were designed by Miatry. I'll link their channel in the description. Their dupers are very helpful. The only addition I've made is these 2 stone walls, and this is just to make sure that the TNT always lands on this block. And then the logs will fall into that water stream. And then this will let trees keep coming through and keep getting harvested so we can get more rooted dirt. If you're looking for an oak log farm, there are better farms for this. This farm was optimized for rooted dirt, not trees. I know, I don't remember who made it, but there's an oak wood farm I saw the other day that gets about 1 log per bone meal, which is drastically better than what this one does. But if you don't want to build a separate oak wood farm, this one will also help you out. But to get back to the note block and what it does, so it sends these 2 flying machines as well as this minecart system. This slightly boosts rates. The issue is that when you have moss carpet, if there's an item on top of it, the minecart can't pull an item through it. And that applies for here and here where the machine doesn't get. To try and help this problem, we have this piston here, and it will just pull out stone blocks. So let's say, for instance, a stone block was right here. Normally when that stone generator is pushing stone in, these will break if the moss block is broken. These will break if the moss block is broken. But moss carpet won't. It'll just stay here. So this machine will just pull the stone block out, and then when that happens, there will be nothing to hold this one here. So it'll break, and then it will get collected. Then this minecart will put it in here, and then spit it into the collection stream. Another thing is that sometimes stone blocks right here will not turn into moss, and that could jam this machine if it hits this. So this piston here will just push it up, so it'll be here instead, and the machine can go under. Then when the machine comes back, it just pulls it back down. And same for this piston, it will just put the stone block back where it got it. But enough about this machine and the minecart and all that. So the pulse that comes out of this machine when it comes back, so the machine will fly down, then it will fly back, and when it returns, this observer will still have a pulse left in it when it arrives on this block, and it will power this slime block, which will send a redstone signal through here. And that goes 2 different ways. So first, the signal goes into this note block, which will send a pulse to the tree dupers, or the tree TNT dupers, and it will also go into this timer. And this redstone timer was designed by SC Petty. I'm also going to put the link in the description to that video. And what this timer will do is it will send out a constant pulse, or a constant signal for a few seconds, which will be just enough time for this stone generator to push stone in. And this stone generator was loosely inspired by a design by Ilmango, so credit to him as well. So the stone will get pushed in, and then it will get turned into moss. And I've already talked about this machine here, but once this machine is powered, and I should add this, the Mossers are powered by the same observer line that powers the TNT dupers up there. But there's a delay long enough that the stone generator can finish its full cycle. And the redstone has a habit of sometimes sending multiple pulses or whatnot. And if that happens, these repeaters will stretch out the first signal so that the last signal is not considered a separate pulse, if you will. But it will also keep this redstone line powered just long enough to keep this piston extended so that this observer can send 4 separate pulses down, which will trigger the Mossers 4 times. And it'll also power this note block 1 time, and then that signal will get stretched out to here. And to go into what that is, if a azalea or flowering azalea, so one of these happens to generate right here, these dispensers, which line the growing spaces, will begin bone mealing. And they use a bunch of bone meal. The good news is, at least once the tree has grown, it will not use any more bone meal. Additionally, if a piece of grass grows here, once it grows to tall grass, it will not make any more grass, won't use any more bone meal. The only way it uses a lot of bone meal per cycle is if a tree just takes a lot of bone meal to grow. But these all fire, and it's important, I should note, that when you build this, you need to make these blocks glazed terracotta because it will let you power these blocks without interfering with the bone meal supply chain, or letting this stick to it. If this stuck to that, this entire thing wouldn't work. So you need to make it glazed terracotta so that the machine can just slip right on by. But then once you've bone mealed the tree, now the tree's here, and then these flying machines will go through, push the dirt out, push the wood up, and when the machines get to the other side here, the rooted dirt will be pushed to right here, and then when the flying machine triggers this observer, when it collides here, it will send a pulse which will push the rooted dirt to the side and trigger this note block to send it back to where it came from. So these pistons here push the rooted dirt out of the way so that the full 12 blocks here are free for the next batch of rooted dirt to come in. One thing I should add, it is possible for this farm to jam. It has never jammed for me. But one thing that can happen is if you're really lucky, one of these modules will grow 3 trees by itself. Like in one cycle, you'll get 3 full trees all in the same cycle. And that's great. But if you're really, really lucky, you'll get 4. And if all 3 of these get 4 trees, you will be at the push limit. And my previous attempt at making a machine like this one time grew 5 trees at one time. And so if 2 of these grow 4, and then the third one grows 5, you'll be at 13, and that will jam the machine simply through the push limit. The good news is that the rest of the farm requires this machine to come back to work, so like it's not just going to keep going, like it'll stop if this machine can't return. But one thing I should add, it is possible for it to jam. It's statistically not very likely, but it can happen. Oh, and then these obsidian blocks here. The reason these are here is so when the rooted dirt gets pushed out, that these TNT dupers don't blow up some rooted dirt and maybe, we'll just pretend they're not here for a second. It could blow up and then land right here. And this is a problem because this is an entire rooted dirt you don't get to have. And we just can't allow that to happen. So we put these blocks here, and then that, make sure they fall into the water stream. Oh, and one thing I should add, um, these dupers are powered by the flying machine getting here. It sends a pulse up, and the pulse is, well, actually, because it's an observer, it'll send like several of them all in quick succession, and these will compress it down into just one really long pulse instead of several tiny pulses. And then this flying machine and this flying machine are separated by 9 repeaters, all in 4 ticks. And this gives enough time for this one to have already detonated before this one drops. Because the last thing you want is the TNT getting like knocked over here. And the same thing goes for up here, except these use 10 for their delay. That way, only one TNT is ever live at a time. But once the items are all blown up or dropped, because if it's moss, it'll just kind of fall here. All the items will come down this water stream, and they will go into this item elevator where I just have a basic collection system. When I built this up on my survival world, I'm probably just going to have them go straight into the sorting system in my base. But you should probably send some of the items to a composter. And to explain that more, we'll go into its rates. So in terms of rooted dirt, we're getting over 271 per hour. When it comes to cobblestone, we're getting about 10.5 an hour. And this cobblestone comes from when a stone block does not turn into moss and gets pushed into the dirt collection system and blown up. So get about 10.5 per hour that way. Interestingly enough, we're getting 1.92 times the amount of log as we're getting rooted dirt, which is pretty funny considering how horrifically inefficient this is as a tree farm, because you're only getting 2 logs per tree in a tree that is usually 5 or more logs. But you know, that's still a decent amount of logs for what it is. We're also getting 7 sticks per hour, and those are probably coming from the TNT dupers blowing up these leaves. So 7 sticks, better than 6 sticks, as I always say. But when it comes to flowering azalea, we're getting 204 an hour, which is pretty good, and then 353 an hour for normal azalea or deflowered azalea. We're getting 537 seeds per hour. I guess this is pretty cool if you like seeds, but you know, it's seeds, so whatever. But the big boys, if you will, being produced are the moss and the moss carpet. So moss carpet, even though it reduces our rate some by being a pain and covering up the stone, we're getting upwards of 1750 of it an hour. And then for moss blocks, we're getting 6165 an hour, which is pretty good. Now, let's be real, you don't need this much moss. So you'd probably be better off just sending it into a composter and getting some of your bone meal back. Now, I haven't put any of this into a composter to see what you get, but I can almost certainly say it will not cover the bone meal you put in. So it consumes almost 3,800 bone meal an hour. Realistically, you want to look up Il Mango and build 2 of his most recent bone meal farms. If you build 2 of those modules, it'll cover this, pretty sure. But these are its rates. Oh, and one other thing I want to add. One other potential thing you could make out of this is I thought you could put a minecart track right here. And now this would require an auto clicker or something. But if you were to take a minecart and get yourself a silk touch hoe, you could maybe get some of the leaves like this. Now, I'm not sure how worthwhile this would be, because it'd be pretty slow because you have to wait for new trees to grow. So I'm sure there's better ways to get leaves, but if you really want to milk this farm for all it's worth, this is another thing you could do with it. One thing to quickly add about the oak log rates is that before you stabilize at the 523 an hour, you'll have to run this for a while. I think it'll take about 8 trees per growing space before there's actually enough log built up that each new log will push stuff into the blast zone. So keep that in mind. Once you build it and turn it on for the first time, you are not going to get 523 an hour. In fact, you're probably not going to get any or hardly any for the first hour um, until these oak logs fill up this space. So that about covers it as far as the farm is concerned. So I'm going to end off with a montage of the farm operationing. If you have any questions at all, leave a comment. I'll do my best to get back to you. And again, I'd like to remind everyone there is a world download in the description. So until next time.